Hello, welcome back to my channel Hasty Books. I'm Camilla, and even though I'm a little bit late, just a little bit, we're already in November, I wanted to wrap up my Victober reading and also do the Victorian literature journey tag. I've been tagged by Roz, Katie, and Kier. I feel very grateful that they've all thought about me. That's very kind of you. And make sure to go check out their channels. I will link them in the description box below. So let's start with the tag. And if you don't want to watch it, it's fine. You can just skip right over to my wrap up of the 5 books I read for Victober. So the first question is, what was your first experience reading Victorian literature and how was it? Well, mine came a bit later in life because obviously I grew up, all my education was done in French till the university level. So, we read a lot more French literature and French classics growing up. I'm sure I've read like some, children's version of Christmas Carol and, a bunch of other stories from the era, but I've never really read them in clearly the author's words, right? So I think to me that really started at university. So I went to university to study English literature. More on that in another video at some point because I have lots to say about it. But in the first class that I took, which is kind of an overview of different literary periods, we obviously discussed Victorian era and Victorian literature. And the main book that I remember reading was The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I don't remember a lot about it. I thought it was a bit overwhelming because obviously this was my first semester studying in English and then reading classics, so it feels like it was a lot. But I also remember thinking that it was maybe, I think like he does quite sensational literature, and so I remember it being quite fun to kind of engage along, a little bit kind of spooky. So I don't think it had a very high impact on me, and because I don't remember feeling like, oh yeah, Victorian literature or Victorian era is a period that I want to study more of. And then I didn't pursue that later in the later years of my degree, and I feel very sad about that because I've discovered such good books, and we'll get to that in the next few questions. But yeah, I feel like my first good experience of Victorian literature has definitely been because of BookTube. Question number 2 is, has the reading of a Victorian book ever brought you to tears? If so, tell us more. I have to say, I don't think so. So I'll be really boring and say, let's jump to the next question because I don't think I've cried from reading these books. I feel like sometimes they're very long-winded, and even though I've really, gone with some of the characters, and again, a bit more on that later, I don't think that there's been stuff where I've just been bawling my eyes out and stuff like that. So let's jump to the next question, which is, are there any people who have played a significant role in your Victorian literature journey? And I have to be completely honest, I think Katie of Books and Things is 100% why I'm reading Victorian literature. I actually, when I started BookTube, it was actually through Katie's videos that I was like learning how to do videos and what I should maybe, be doing and ideas to start. And then I was watching more her channel and there was so much about Victorian literature, and I realized that's a big part of literature that I kind of skipped in my degree, as we've just mentioned. And I thought, let me try a couple more pieces, and then I fell into books that were so incredible, and I feel like I've discovered actually some of my favorite books ever. So I'm very grateful, and obviously I think through BookTube generally there's been a few more people who've given me like recommendation or like just giving me comments about how they've perceived things maybe differently or similarly to me, and it's been really great to grow in that sense through the BookTube community. All right, in number 4 we have, do you have a favorite film or TV adaptation of a Victorian book? What about one you'd like to see made? I haven't seen a lot of it because, again, I didn't grow up in the UK. I've seen a lot of people that I've seen their videos. I've talked about how when they were growing up, there was all these, adaptations on BBC and like on TV and stuff like that. And I didn't grow up with that. Obviously, I've seen adaptations of like Jane Austen, stuff like that, because I think they were like very big, movies, and I feel like they were a bit more like Hollywoody. But growing up, in French Canada, I didn't get exposed to as much of the BBC series and stuff like that. I know a couple of years ago, I watched the TV adaptation of North and South. I think that's the answer to the question. That's definitely 100% my favorite. Oh, hello. Love the pairing, love the actors, love the whole mini series. love it. I don't know everything that's been made, obviously, but if there's one that I would like to see made, or I would just like to see if it's already been made, let me know in the comments if you know, is probably Middlemarch. I actually remember, I don't remember much about this book, but I remember I finished it and I was like, oh my god, this was so good. So I need to revisit it because like, I don't even remember that I'd said that until I saw my review online. And I was like, okay, clearly it left a mark and it clearly was really, really good. And I would love to see an adaptation of that. Yeah. And then on question number 5, we have, which character in Victorian literature most resembles you or you identify with the most? And again, I have to say, I think it might be Margaret Hale from the North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Again, let's just mention that again. This is, I think, one of my favorite books ever, not just Victorian literature. This is one of the first books that I kind of decided to go with when I started my Victorian literature journey through BookTube. And I fell in love, and nothing has dethroned this book since. It's just so good. I love it. And I feel like Margaret Hale is obviously an English person from the South, and she moves to the North. I am an immigrant. It's not the same, I know, but sometimes there's some of the things with her perspective that I was like, I really identified with, and I could really see myself having gone through that a little bit when I moved to Scotland. And obviously it's not the north of England, but it is the north of the UK, and it is very differently than how, you know, I was raised and how I grew up, you know, my environment and the people and everything. So I think it's been really great to see a bit of that perspective, and also to learn more about, well, I guess a UK context, you know, even, I guess this is supposed to be Manchester, but it's not. Where I've still not been actually, but that's again a comment for another time. But I think, yeah, she's a character that I identified with the most. And I think, I mean, Jane Eyre, how can you not mention Jane Eyre though? She's such an incredible narrator and character. I don't know that Jane Eyre is my favorite book of Victorian literature because it's this one, but her character I think is my favorite. Like the development, the growth, like everything about her character is just so interesting. And I think if I'd read this as a teenager, I would have loved it even more, probably loved it the most, because I do feel like this character is a little bit more mature in that sense, especially throughout the book, while Jane Eyre has, like, you know, it's more of an arc. And yeah, I love these two characters and they're just really, really good. Question number 6 is, do you have a favorite moment, scene, or line from Victorian literature? Tell us about it or read it to us. Okay, I am not that prepared for this, but what I will say is that again, North and South, like, I'm sorry, like, I have to come back to this. I love this book. I love when Margaret, she just has such conviction, and I love that she stands up for things. And I do love the moment, actually, and I know it's maybe the romantic in me, but you know, the moment when she's with her brother at the train station and John sees her and then he's like, oh, I can't say anything because of her reputation, but also, oh my god, I can't believe, like, she's into someone else. But anyway, I just kind of love that moment. And then I love the moment a bit later when they both realize, like, what's happened and why, kind of their perspective. It's very Pride and Prejudice, obviously, but I just love those moments between them when they're both a bit, like, cynical, a little bit, I guess, prejudiced. And again, later on, when they both admit, like, the love and the attention and the respect they have for each other. And yeah, those are the moments that I love the most. But again, I've been thinking of revisiting this during the rereadathon December. Should I? Oh, maybe I should. Question number 7 is, does any Victorian literature intimidate you? If so, what and why? I think all Victorian literature intimidated me before now. So when I started university, as we've mentioned, it was very overwhelming for me, and I think everything intimidated me. And then with BookTube, obviously we're much later on. I'm in my 30s. My English is much better as well, so it makes it easier to read classics. And I've tackled quite a lot, and some big books as well. I think the most intimidating thing about classics from the Victorian era is that they are big. Some of these books, oh my god. So The Way We Live Now was one I had on my classics TBR for 2022, and it was really intimidating because it's huge. I've just read it this month, so you can see my review later in this video. But But yeah, it was quite intimidating. But I think they're so much more approachable than I thought they were going to be. Because of their size, it feels quite a lot. But then you dive into them, and they're usually written quite, like, it's quite approachable, and it's quite readable. So I think I was intimidated from probably the wrong reasons. And I'm glad that I've dived more. I think some authors are intimidating in a sense where I'm just like, will I gel with them? The community is quite intimidating as well because people feel strongly. I've gotten some bad comments about my dislike, or not dislike, my not getting along with Charles Dickens. I respect what he does. I think his books are good, but they're not for me. And I've gotten some bad comments about that. So I think there's also that part of the community that's not being nice. As in, that's been intimidating to talk sometimes about my thoughts about classics because it feels like some people love them so much. It's difficult to give an honest opinion if you would not share that feeling. But yeah, I think now I feel a lot more open to trying lots of different work from the Victorian era, especially. I think especially, that's the positive side of the book community that's relating to Victorian literature. I feel so much more kind of keen to do it and able to do it as well. In number 8, we're getting, what tips would you give to someone early on in their Victorian literature journey? Well, I feel like I'm still very early on in my Victorian literature journey, to be frank. And I think what's worked for me is trying to read things that I feel like it would work for me. So obviously I've talked about there are some names where I'm just like, I guess I have to read that. I have to read Charles Dickens. I have to read blah, blah, blah. But I think maybe don't do that. Maybe just read what kind of interests you. If you're looking for a romance or for something about class or for something, a bit more horror, or if you love a thriller, like go for these genres. I think Katie mentioned that actually. I love that about her video, the Victorian literature journey tag that she did and tagged me in. And I love that bit because I think it's true. Like, I think just look for something that interests you in what you usually read and then try it in the Victorian era. And I think that's worked really well for me. Like, obviously love Pride and Prejudice. And then obviously this then became, actually I think I prefer this to Pride and Prejudice. So, I think there's a lot out there and there's so much choice. So don't just go for the big names. Like, just look for what might interest you. Go to Katie's channel. You'll 100% find something you enjoy from all her recommendations because it's so like holistic about the whole era. And there's plenty of out there. In number 9, we have, what is your top recommended read for other readers of Victorian literature? So it won't surprise you to think, I swear it's not my only book that I own from the Victorian era. I have a few more, but this is 100% my favorite. I actually had from the library and then I bought this copy because I was like, I need to own it. I love it so much. So I bought it after reading it. So I've never read this copy actually. I loved Middlemarch. I used to own it, but I think I gave it away to Charity Shop because I hated the version that I had. Like the paper, like everything about it was not great. I need to buy a new version at some point. But Middlemarch by George Eliot is excellent. And again, one I have to revisit. And also, from the Bronte sisters, I think people always love going with, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, stuff like that. But I would say a good one to maybe start is Agnes Grey. To me, it's like a shorter version and more like almost a little bit more accessible version of Jane Eyre. So I think that's a good one to try. And then I thought I would add an extra wee question here. So 9A is, what's next on your Victorian literature journey? Because I'm so early on in my journey, I thought I would add this in and tell you what I would love to do next because there's so much out there and I want to try so much more. So one of the first things I want to do is definitely read more George Eliot. I've talked about it. I want to revisit Middlemarch, but there's so many other books that I definitely need to try. I would like to see if George Eliot is the author for me. Obviously, I know I love Elizabeth Gaskell, but I would love to try a little bit more of George Eliot because I loved Middlemarch so much. When I did my Classics TBR in 2022, I had mentioned that I have a goal of reading all of the books by the Bronte sisters, and I have a couple missing, so I would like to finish those. So that's kind of next on my journey. So Tennis of Wildfell Hall, I had started it, but I need to restart it because that was last year. There's The Professor and Men Shirley. I'd also love to continue with Elizabeth Gaskell. I've read so many of her books now, But you know, there's plenty more to go. So there's Mary Barton, Ruth, Cousin Phyllis, like there's lots that I want to continue with. I feel like I'm at the point where I'd like to maybe try a Thomas Hardy. I may keep that for next Victober and see if it fits the theme and if I can get a copy. I feel like I want to dip my toes in there a little bit. And finally, I think there's one book on my Victorian TBR that I would love to read. It's called Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. And I've just heard great things about it. I think it was on the Penguin website that I've seen this recommendation, and it's definitely on my list now. And the last, it's not really a question, the last thing of this tag is to tag people. I won't tag anyone, I'm sorry. But if you've seen it and you would love to talk about your Victorian literature journey, if you love Victorian literature, if you just started, just feel free to take this and go ahead and, you know, do this video, because it's really fun to discuss like what's really good and what, you know, what you've read and what's intimidated you, and kind of build that community around it. So thank you, and I hope that you've enjoyed like this tag. And now I will go into part 2 of this video, which is going to be a short, because I'm sure this is long enough, a short review of the 5 books that I read for Victober. So I read 10 books in October, but only 5 for Victober. 5 were for something else. And the first book that I read for Victober was Sylvia's Lovers by Elizabeth Gaskell, as I'm continuing my Gaskell, you know, journey, as I talked about. And I feel like I thought it was good. Obviously not as good as North and South. But I don't know, I found it quite preachy. I thought that she was a bit sheltered and a bit conceited, and then her cousin Philip, what an arsehole. Like I really struggled actually. I thought it was a good book and I enjoyed like all the ups and downs, you know, and the twists and turns. But I find it really difficult because I don't know that I rooted for anyone. I didn't think any character was particularly nice, or like that I was keen to root for them. By the end, yeah, I found it a bit preachy. And it reminded me a little bit because recently my husband and I watched Cyrano with Peter Dinklage. Anyway, I've never read that story or anything, but you know, everyone knows the story of Cyrano. And it's very funny because the end, it really reminded me of Sylvia's Lovers. I can't really talk about why without giving spoilers, so I won't discuss more, but it just gave me a strong vibe of this similar thing. And I don't know that I loved it in Cyrano as well, so I didn't love it here. But yeah, generally it was an okay book, but I think at the moment it's definitely the bottom book from Elizabeth Gaskell for me, if that says anything. Book number 2 that I read was The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. This is just, I don't know if that's book number 4 or 3, whichever. This is where I'm at in all of the books of Sherlock Holmes. You know, the last time I read a book by Arthur Conan Doyle, like in the Sherlock Holmes series, I thought myself, I don't know that I want to keep going here. And I remembered why when I was reading this one. I just don't know that I care that much. It feels very repetitive. And this novel particularly was very much, because it was the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. It's a bunch of stories. So almost every chapter was just a different short story. And I don't know, I just like the connection. And I always say I don't think I'm going to keep going now. So we'll see if I decide to pick up. I think the next one is The Hound of the Baskerville. So we'll see if I get to that or not, but it's not a priority. Then I read the short story The Man in the Scented Coat by Sarah Grand, although I can't find that short story on any of the like list of work that she's done, so I have no idea if this is correct or if this is another Sarah Grand. Like I have no idea if I've done the right thing here, but I read it, I thought it was a short and interesting story, but there wasn't like a lot of meat to it, so I don't think I can say that I've read something representative of Sarah Grand, but you know, I tried it. Then I read The Way We Live Now by Angelique Trollope, as I mentioned earlier in the tag. This was one of the books on my Classics TBR for 2022, and it's quite intimidating because it's huge. I actually just gave my copy back to the library 2 days ago, but I think I enjoyed it, but I find it a bit tedious after a while. I think there's a quote in the book that says something like, this really shows like when people want to make easy money, and like the fallouts and the relationship that kind of go with that. And it's very kind of representative of our kind of contemporary environment. And I definitely agree. But yeah, I thought it was, I don't know, maybe I thought it was too long. Maybe that's why, like, because it keeps you going for so long. And there's a lot of storyline, a lot of things. Like the end felt never ending because there were so many things to tie back up. So yeah, I don't know that I loved it. I think I liked it, but I don't know that I loved it. I feel like I would try another Anthony Trollope, but I don't know if he's for me. It felt a bit more about money and less about the relationship, even though obviously the relationship were because of the money. So again, maybe it's because there was nothing for me to like kind of grasp on, because there were so many things as well. I didn't just feel pulled along by one person particularly. Yeah. Anyway, let's end on a positive note. The last book that I read was Dracula by Bram Stoker, and holy crap, that book was so good. I started it because I was waiting for my copy of The Way We Live Now, and I had nothing for Victober to read. So I picked up the audiobook from my library Libby app, and I was like, okay, I'll just listen to a little bit of that, try it. And then it jumps so quickly into the action, and also it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. Because you think of the movies and also the idea of Dracula, and it's like, oh, and then you start the book and it's not that at all. And I love that it's in the epistolary form, like it's journals and letters and correspondence and so many different characters. And obviously did not realize that Van Helsing was from Dracula. I don't know why, I just never even questioned it. And his character was just so interesting. And also the female characters I thought were quite well written. And yeah, I just loved it. I thought it was like a very pleasant surprise to dig into this book and then just get really, really interested and feel like it felt very modern as well, like very relevant to what's happening now. And I just loved everything about it. A big recommendation from me, and I think it kind of lightened up my month, and it was a bit by accident actually, so I'm glad that I went off piste a little bit, and it really kind of brought home the Victorian journey for me this month. So yeah, that's it for me. That's the 5 books and the tag. And yeah, I feel like I had a good month, and I read lots of other cool books around in the month as well. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. And if you're going to do this tag, just, let me know in the comments, and I'm happy to go and watch your video and, enjoy learning about everyone's different way into Victorian literature. As always, thank you so much for watching, and hasty back. Bye.